And welcome everyone to the last session of the National Conference for Nuffield 2021. I'm coming to you from Emerald here today, and we've got a cluster of Nuffield scholars that have been afforded the opportunity in Queensland to get together. So such an honour to be able to present to you today, and I'll be hosting you. So congratulations to the scholars that were just announced. It's tremendous effort for everyone involved, given the circumstances, and great to see that we've got a few Queenslanders there this year. And we're very glad and very humbled to see that number of percentage in the national forum. So that's great. Today our theme is based on the UN Sustainable Development Goals that were developed in 2015. And I just wanted to peel that a little bit back before we got sort of kicked off here today. And in doing that, also thank our partner and conference partner and sponsor, the CSIRO, for their generous support. And we've got them today in terms of a keynote speaker through Jen Taylor, which is fantastic. But I suppose to give context and a bit of background on those development goals, it's the pressure that we're placing on the globe and the responsibility of agriculture to I suppose, address that. To give us a scenario and snapshot, there's 7.9 billion people in the world at the moment, at 2021 figures, and it grows by 83 million per year, so approximately 200,000 people per day. Or to contextualise that further, that's 4,000 busloads per day arriving, to inhabit the world, and they need food, shelter, and to be clothed to survive and inhabit the world. So, as the UN sort of sees that as a metric, how do we challenge with 17 sustainable development goals how we can address that? So today we've got a lineup of speakers. Our sustainable development goal is goal number 11, and that's sustainable cities and communities, and we'll try and relate that back to that theme and topic. So without any further ado, I'd love to present to you Dr. Jen Taylor. Dr. Jen Taylor in 2016 attended a Nuffield Global Focus Program, which was brilliant while she was with the CSIRO. Jen has been completing her honours in biochemistry at the University of Queensland and a PhD in medical genetics at the Queensland Institute of Medical Research, studying gene identification strategies in human diseases. And particularly at the moment, Jen is charged with running and involved with more than 120 scientists working across a distributed national footprint, including 8 sites and multiple research stations across Australia. It's a true honour to have Jen present this afternoon, and that'll be followed by a panel session and an introduction to 2019 scholars as they sort of summarise their study and interrelate it to Sustainable Development Goal number 11 from the UN. So Jen, I'd like to hand over to you, and thanks for convening this technology.
James, we've just had a little bit of a problem pushing Jen back in as a panelist. So Jen was just going to rejoin, and hopefully that will work. So brilliant. Just bear with us for a minute, but we can see Jen's picture on the screen.
Okay, great, brilliant. Thanks, thanks, Jody. So I suppose just to introduce Jen a little bit more, Jen is, I suppose, in charge of the research component of the farm research and building, I suppose, the capabilities in CSIRO to support agriculture in Australia. And it was particularly interesting having Jen from the CSIRO join the Global Focus Program to share her knowledge, but also to connect with the other scholars that are available on that GFP to her to connect, I suppose, the problem solution spaces that they might encounter when connected with the CSIRO, and to escalate, I suppose, the research that can go on and the impact it can create with the with that body of work that the government and CSIRO put together. So it was a real honour to have Jen participate in that, and I think all the scholars really benefited from having them there. Additionally, what I'd like to sort of share with everyone is Nuffield is great with the research, but it's also a great networking opportunity to share, I suppose, the problem solution spaces that we that we all are accustomed to in agriculture. And if we can get the academics involved, that's great, and the research. So I think Jen's back in now, so I won't talk anymore, and we'll try to push Jen onto the presentation role. And thanks very much for joining us, Jen.
I'm here. Thanks, James. Great job filling in. Sorry about that, everyone.
Well, I hope I was accurate, Jen, but well done.
I'll never know. I had to dial out and dial back in, but
well, it's sang praises anyway. So well done.
No, thanks everyone. Yeah, and I'll jump right in, and what a pleasure it is to be here, and thanks very much for Nuffield Australia for allowing me to talk to you today. And CSIRO is obviously very proud to be associated with Nuffield, and it's fantastic to see this conversation going on already, a fantastic conversation. So as James mentioned, my name is Jen Taylor, and I lead the farming systems portfolio within agriculture and food business of CSIRO. And as you probably all know, CSIRO is Australia's national science agency, and really you are all our major customer. Our goal is to create value through innovation for Australia and its industries, and notably the ag industry. So we pride ourselves on trying to do that to the best of our ability, and we did an analysis in 2020 and calculated that for every $1 invested in CSIRO, that there's nearly $8 in value returned to the Australian people and its industries. So that's wonderful, but as a national science agency, not all our impacts are monetized, so we equally value our roles in contributing to science excellence, helping Australia as a trusted advisor, and training the next generation in science and innovation. So they're really fantastic things that we enjoy. So James already explained a little bit about my day job. So the CSIRO agriculture and food business spans 25 sites across Australia. It's highly industry facing, and more than 75% of our funds come from outside CSIRO through our partnerships with government, industry and international agencies. So personally, I guess through my time in CSIRO, which has sort of been 12 years now, and also in my association with Nuffield, I've become increasingly fascinated with the process of ag innovation, how that's successfully achieved. And there's a whole bunch, as you would know, of human and community and technology ingredients in that success. But even more so now, how far can we push innovation in Australia to really help us solve some of the challenges that we're talking about today, and some of the challenges that are facing our industries? So the focus of this session is a big challenge in of itself, sustainable cities and communities. How do we make our communities inclusive and safe and resilient and sustainable? So we've already talking a little bit about sustainability and resilience in the previous session, but I wanted to think about it in a lens of innovation. So how do we use innovation to continue to meet these goals in resilience and sustainability for the Australian ag industry and its communities? Okay, so before I get going, I thought I'd be clear on my definition of innovation, because it's a word we hear a lot about these days. And even though I am a scientist, a lifelong addicted scientist, when I talk about innovation, I'm not talking about science. Science and technology are only small parts of innovation, and not even always essential parts of innovation. Invention, which is technology discovery or discovery in of itself, are products of science. Innovation, however, is creating a new way of how something is done. It's achieving a change in the real world and real practice. So innovation, therefore, may use or deploy a shiny new science and technology, but equally it may not. And there are many types of innovation, depending on what is being changed. So the Australian ag industry are constant and really intuitive innovators across many types of innovation. So there are people trying new cost models, finance models, farming processes, governance models. Perhaps you're looking for market innovation, brand innovation, diversification. These are all forms of innovation. So while science and R&D of the type that we are interested in CSIRO and in our university systems are not essential to all types of innovation, when R&D is combined with innovation, it can really lead to some dramatic leaps forward in industry and society. And when we're talking about really large and complex challenges of resilience and sustainability and things that, as we were talking last session, may even need clearer definitions and measurement, substantial parts of these challenges probably can only be solved by the types of innovation that really effectively bring together R&D and successful innovation. So how is Australia placed to turn R&D into innovation? Well, in reality, this is a bit of a mixed bag of strengths and weaknesses for Australia, I would say. Traditionally, Australia does not rank well relative to similar economies for innovation. In 2021, the Global Innovation Index, which is an index that ranks a lot of 132 economies around the world, Australia ranks about in the middle of 52 similar economies, so 25th out of 52, for its ability to turn R&D inputs into innovation outputs and value. There are a range of reasons for this, so I won't go into them here, but and it's a matter for debate, I guess, the cause for that. Other points maybe to note is Australia's domestic expenditure on R&D as a percentage of GDP is amongst the lowest in that class also. And what we call the valley of death, which is, I guess, taking R&D across into successful scaled commercialization, be that ag tech or SMEs, has always really been immensely challenging to complete in Australia. So that makes R&D and innovation difficult. In an R&D sense, Australian research funding is immensely competitive. We have world-class research institutes, but success rates for domestic research funds are very low, less than 10%. And funds really no longer cover the true costs of the research, and that often leads to slicing and some less ambitious research targets. So it's a tough game, and I guess to some degree that's expected in any endeavour or industry, but particularly now, given the challenges that are ahead of us, a rethink of our approach is required, and there's a fair bit of debate about how we position ourselves to do that. Funding is certainly not the only issue. Australia has quite a fragmented R&D sector, and it's important to note really that successful R&D really does rely on collaboration across sciences and institute boundaries, because it relies on building creative and integrated solutions. So that requires collaboration, and fragmentation, either be it due to competition or sort of industry sector focus, really can work against effective R&D and effective delivery to industry. However, that's probably the bad news. So I'll share with you, I guess, some good news, and that is that we're constantly reminded that when good R&D is connected, it really has stunning power to address increasingly complex challenges. And I'm not sure if the word COVID is banned from this workshop, but I haven't heard it yet, so I'm going to break that, sorry, Jody, and just point out a bit of a lesson from COVID that I found quite inspiring. And in January 2020, as we know, the world was challenged to vaccinate against a virus it had never seen. And it was a category of virus that had never yet been successfully vaccinated against, despite decades of trying. The last vaccine to be newly developed was polio. It took 4 years to develop and 5 decades and still counting to deploy that vaccine. COVID science developed a new vaccine strategy in under 10 months, and now 22 months in, I checked the stats yesterday, 3.7 billion people, which is 48% of the entire world population, has been vaccinated, which is still a ways to go, but a stunning achievement. So what happened? Well, in an R&D sense, it was unprecedented. It was a really laser focus on solving a shared challenge. There was immense urgency. There was a removal of all collaboration barriers. It changed what science was done. It changed how the work was funded. Almost immediately, there was unprecedented data sharing across the whole research community on how to solve this challenge. How the work was being published in scientific literature changed because they knew that the work had to be fast and accurate. Scientific journals actually globally fast-tracked peer review and verification of COVID science and delayed peer review of a lot of other publications and topics. So all that happened behind the scenes, and this amazing result came about. So other folks are asking, why not now the same approach to these sustainability development goals or other issues facing us, tough issues facing us? So I just told that story because I'm not suggesting we need a national pandemic to restructure our R&D and innovation system. However, there's a lot of optimism and reason for hope that once we get the key ingredients for that right, there really can be rapid and successful innovation. So I wanted to share with you, I guess, 2 stories or 2 activities that are now emerging that are really starting to access these concepts and try and bring a unified R&D and innovation system behind a few large challenges in Australian agriculture. So the first one I wanted to share with you was a little bit of a model that we're trying. It's called a venture science model called company creation. And as we all know, to successfully deliver R&D to innovation, you need several things. You need new science and technology that addresses a real industry need. Secondly, there needs to be partnerships across the whole technology delivery chain to deliver that technology at scale. And finally, you need a market and an adoption pathway that you can successfully and responsibly embed that innovation into the industry. And traditionally, things would be done in that order. You'd do your science, you'd have your eureka moment, you'd then go out and try and find a venture fund company, and then you'd try and build enough capital to take that to market. So this traditional approach was really failing at the second hurdle and leading to large gaps in the R&D translation when that venture capital was struggling to make the connection with those early stage investments in R&D, and a lot of tech was getting orphaned at that stage. The venture science model works that backwards. So this starts with an understanding of the market first and the opportunity. It then goes back and builds the partnership, including investor venture investment at a second, and then that venture partnership creates a company that goes about the required science last. So this reverses the traditional model, and the strength of the venture science model is the partnerships that form between the existing industry partner, the research investor investment, and this partnership guides and resources the science required to innovate and bring value to the market. So no valley of death, it's essentially removed. So this was how the plant-based protein company V2 Foods was created, as a partnership between Hungry Jack's as the industry partner, CSIRO as the research supplier, and Main Sequence Ventures, which was the venture investment fund. V2 Foods is now a $0.5 billion company, so it's quite a successful model for that. Similarly, Future Feed low emissions livestock feed company was formed as a company creation model, and that raised $13 million in investment last year. So the model's rapidly growing. Main Sequence Venture, which invested in both of those, has recently completed a second fundraise, 250 million, and this year will be launching another 4 venture science companies. So the model is a whole of system approach, and it takes support from every part of the innovation system: industry, investors, research, and government, and provides a partnership that really accelerates innovation. So the second mechanism I briefly wanted to share with you is also another whole of system approach, and that's the program of missions that CSIRO has recently launched, and most of you may have heard of this. And missions are broad collaborative research programs designed to help address big challenges, and they aim to provide that really kind of COVID style laser focus on a challenge that really pulls together cross-sector, cross-industry collaboration to solve this as rapidly and efficiently as possible. In September last month, CSIRO launched 3 ag-facing missions: the Drought Resilience Mission, the Future Protein Mission, and the Trusted Agri-Foods Exports Mission. And these all target quite different problems, but they all share a common approach, which is a strong focus on developing science after deeply understanding what the industry and market requires, and most importantly, a partnership and a collaboration that spans Australian research boundaries, industry and government from day one. So I don't have time to go through all 3 of them, but if you want to find out more, then please reach out. I'll just give you a bit of an example from the Drought Resilience Mission, because it fits in with SDG11, which has a goal around disaster risk reduction for communities. And we know, I guess, what's in front of us in terms of predictions, climate models going forward. And I guess the Drought Resilience Mission has an aim to reduce the impact of drought on our farmers and regional communities by 30% by 2030, so in the next decade. How are we going to do this? Well, there's already some science and tech on the shelf that we can bring to bear. Things like new deep sown wheat that are already being trialled, better capture of deep moisture for emergence, early to late sowing, highly efficient irrigation technologies through canopy temperature monitoring, improved weather forecasting, these sorts of things. Bringing that all under the one umbrella of the mission, but also things like storing water underground or water banking. There's new technology to map potential sites for managed aquifer recharge and to identify where we could store really large amounts of water in natural aquifers for use by communities and by industries in periods of dry. So there's some exciting technologies coming through in the missions. But to wrap up, I'll just say that addressing the big challenges to achieve our goals for resilience and sustainability, there is science well underway. However, to achieve the innovation required is going to take a bit of a rethink, perhaps, on how we utilise the whole of our innovation sector and how we build those partnerships, research, government, investors and industry together. Innovation takes a community, it takes thinking through delivery partnerships alongside or even before the science is done. So I encourage you to continue to look for ways to be involved in things that are happening out there in R&D and innovation. And if you want to know more about any of the activities I've spoken to about today, have a look at the CSIRO website or just shoot me an email. That would be great. Thanks again for the chance to talk to you today, and back to you, James.
Yeah, that was absolutely tremendous, and you can just see the value of what that involvement in 2016 was with the GFP. All the narrative and everything you discussed was actually quite on point and impactful. You know, sort of practical on ground application of research and science. And I just commend you on that presentation to begin with, and like to delve into it further. I'll let everyone sort of digest everything. I need more paper to take notes on what you were discussing just then. So well done. But I've got a few questions for you later. We might just throw into the 2019 scholars just to give a recap of their study and just talk to us a little bit about their research today. So we've got to line up 3 panelists today. Christina Kelman, who's on the program, can't join us, unfortunately. But yeah, we've got Renee Anderson, Frank Miller, and Anthony Close. And I'd just like to introduce Renee Anderson as our first panelist. Renee's social license to farm, improve social, environmental, and economic sustainability. Renee's an irrigation farmer from Emerald in central Queensland. Throughout her time as an agronomist for 20 years, Renee has observed many barriers to adoption of better environmental management practices on farms. So Renee's been researching and exploring the opportunities to break down those barriers, and we've been very, privileged to have Renee join us at this cluster up here in Emerald. So Renee, if you're ready to join in, I'll pass on to you now, and thanks very much. Just be a 2-minute coverage of what Renee's been up to, and we'll hold questions till after that.
Thank you for allowing me to join as a panel member. My name is Renee Anderson. Thanks so much, James. Food and fibre producer also here on the Central Highlands, and farming on those soils that Stuart mentioned can be a little bit tricky, those heavy cracking clays or self-mulching vertisols, we like to call them up here. Growing mung beans, cotton, chickpeas, wheat, and popcorn under irrigation, and the last 5 years with this very dry weather, quite often semi-irrigated situations. 2019 Nuffield Scholar, and I'm so grateful to the Australian cotton industry, both the Cotton Research Development Corporation and Cotton Australia, for supporting my travels and my scholarship. It's an industry that I've spent my whole study and work life working in, and it was a driving factor of my study topic. I travelled across 15 countries in 15-week period across 2019 and 2020. And I happened to be in California when COVID hit the East Coast, and did a very quick trip back to Australia. So my study travels focused on 3 aspects that influence social licence. That is best management practices, communication, and the barriers to adoption. So social licence at the very basic level is about trust, and it's very much driven by our ability in agriculture to show transparent evidence of continual improvement in each of the 4 pillars of sustainability, which include the human, social, environmental, and economic factors. It requires honest engagement with the general public, our consumers, our key stakeholders, and genuinely listening to their concerns and finding alignment with our core values. My key focus was looking at diverse and resilient agricultural systems globally that reduce the risk of the impacts to our businesses, the environment, our employees, and our communities, while minimising carbon emissions, energy use, and climate change risks. So some of the key learnings that I found was sustainable agriculture, as we've heard all day today, is an accumulation of regionally suitable, multiple on-ground evidence-based practices that continually improve through knowledge gains and through research, with an essential focus on improving biodiversity and soil health. And if backed by really strong extension teams, they have a much higher uptake of success. The other thing that I really found across every country was best management wasn't limited to or exclusive to one farming system type. Investment and collaborative R&D between industries, education and training, and connecting different people, whether that's through formal, informal, or upskilling, and finding gaps and investing in people to adopt change towards better practice was absolutely vital. Peer-to-peer learning is one of the most effective ways to engage other farmers and encourage best management practice adoption. And agriculture really needs a genuine move beyond what often seems like crisis management driven adoption to consistent and continual sustainability goals. as the next drought, which we're still going through here, and the next global pandemic is possibly just around the corner. So planning for those future crises is absolutely key. I found financial incentives are not always a key driver. However, those collaborative investments and between different stakeholders absolutely drive sustainability goals to happen a lot quicker on farm. So how does my project fit within SDG11? So one sustainability target that's often overlooked is that human and social sustainability and community engagement. And COVID has really highlighted this to me over this last 18 months to 2 years. Social sustainability and responsibilities certainly isn't limited to on farm, and it includes our social behaviours, responsible environmental and social norms for everyone along the whole entire supply chain. Inclusive, fair, resilient communities and workplaces where everyone has a voice, and we quickly address and respond to their concerns. Creating opportunities for all people, addressing inequality and empowering our communities, our farmers and employees, and continue to encourage and support people to be drivers of their own solutions, both on farm and off farm. Resilient communities also allow access to all basic human rights, with a focus on reducing poverty, gender imbalances, and creating safe spaces and housing for societies today and into the future. SDG 11 is significant. It's comprehensive and really complex goal to work towards creating sustainable cities and communities that can withstand both climate change and unprecedented population growth, and providing clean and stable water supplies, green spacing, good air quality, and including the reduction of greenhouse gas emissions, which unfortunately cities contribute to about 70% of. These urban communities are often prone to the impacts of natural disasters as they predominantly lie across the coastlines. And so that's a huge risk to their power, their water supply, and their food supply. So planning is absolutely essential. And as Tamara mentioned yesterday, the transformation towards resilient and sustainable agriculture and communities is going to require the redesign of our cities looking forward, even our farming systems, as well as a considered shift in our patterns of production, consumption, and our waste. So it comes back to reduce, reuse, and recycle. Thank you.
Renee, well done. That's brilliant. Great to see you've done some research on SDG 11, and yeah, I agree with the sentiment in terms of why do we always respond to crisis and not a continuum of improvement? So yes, that's great, and a theme that Jen shared as well. We might just hold questions for you for till the end there, Renee, I suppose, Frank, we'll jump into you now, if that's okay, and get you cracking. I realise you're in Tasmania down there, but just to introduce Frank, Frank Miller is a 2019 scholar, and his research sort of theme is adding value and attracting investment to Northern Territory timberland. So it's quite an interesting, sort of area of study. Frank is a 2019 NT scholar that has been exploring the relationship between timber, forestry, and agriculture, realising the slowing of the investment of plantations in Northern Australia, and how do we address that? So, Frank, I'll throw over to you now, and thanks for joining us.
Thanks, James. Yeah, it's good to be here, and it's nice actually to have some cooler weather, given it's the build-up in the Northern Territory. So, yeah. So as James highlighted, my study topic was around attracting investment and adding value to the Northern Territory timberlands. One of the key, I work for a forest manager who manages assets on behalf of international institutional investors. And we'd seen a slowing of the expansion of our activity from investment and the growth of the estate. And I sought to investigate what are the key drivers around some of the institutional investments globally, and also looking at post-forest gate valuating. So I guess there were two aspects. There were investment barriers and valuating, and both pre and post forest gate valuating. So I went round and I discussed issues with institutional investors in the US, and that's a primary hub for international timberland investment. And it became pretty clear to me that we're no longer looking at simply land and timber production in international investment, where that they're looking for non-forest values, and non-forest values that both offer investment performance and ESG credibility. So they had a number of investors that were saying to them, it's nice to get potentially 2% increased internal rate of return for your investment, given that if you get carbon, for example, recognised in your investment. However, we also want to ensure that the environmental credentials for our investment is recognised. And so it was quite clear to us that in Northern Australia, the species that we manage up there in plantations were ineligible for carbon credits. So that was a clear barrier that I identified. And then after that, looking at pre-forest gate valuating, and I've integrated grazing within our estate. So I looked at integrated management systems globally to see if they could be commercialised at scale through international larger institutional investment. We graze around about 5,000 head on our estate of cattle, and it's purely an organic system that organic in that I've built it organically to reduce herbicide use, fuel reduction for fire protection, and it was quite clear that there was interest in that. So I guess coming back into Australia, one of the key things I've done is been able to get our species eligible for carbon credits. And as everyone would be aware online, carbon is now not just a catch cry on people's lips, but it's actually happening. We're now seeing since in the last 18 months over a doubling of the ACCU's price. The last auction fetched $28 a tonne. So that clearly says that there's opportunities for not only forestry companies, but and one thing that I really want to emphasise in this forum is that there's opportunities for all land managers to ensure that there's an integration opportunity to plant trees on farms, and then I guess going into how does this all integrate into SDG11? Well, the quality of life, the air quality, and green spaces in urban areas are incredibly important. And as James alluded to, when you've got 40 busloads of people coming onto the earth on a daily basis, it is really important to see where that land's going to come from. And quite clearly, it's going to result in a lot of deforestation. So how do we offset those sorts of developments and ensure that these populations are sustainable? And yeah, so I guess I could go on for a long time, but some of the things that I've done is created a hub so that we're now eligible to plant African mahogany and get carbon credits. And quite clearly, there's now an appetite to do that. So, it's been a very worthwhile venture in undertaking the scholarship.
Frank, thank you so much. That's very impressive what you've already sort of achieved since you've been back. So, I think that's tremendous. I suppose the discipline and the conviction you've got in this space, and it's very important to integrate that with agriculture and make a meaningful narrative out of it all, and pull together those business models that actually work. And I think there's a bit of a theme here about developing various different business models to address the growing global population in agriculture, and just not applying traditional business models, actually being innovative with it. So that's quite great. I might hold the questions for you to the end, Frank, and jump into Anthony. But thank you very much for joining us from down there in cool Tassie. Quite jealous of you, the climate down there at the moment. So well done on getting down there. Anthony, I'd just like to introduce you on. Anthony is sponsored by AWI, which was my sponsor in 2012 as well. They're seeing some great growth in that industry at the moment. So well done to everyone there. Anthony studied ways the merino can again become a feature on the farming landscape. So as a 2009 scholar, Anthony's from Cullo, is it? Cullo?
Yeah,
Cullo. In Victoria, and as a mixed livestock producer, was researching the prominence of the merino sheep in the Australian landscape and how to accelerate, the reintroduction or the regeneration, if I can sort of throw to that term. So, Anthony, love to hear your sentiments, and we'll try and be prompt so that we can have some good questions and answers and engage the audience. Thanks, Anthony.
Yep, no worries, James, and I'll sure I'll make it nice and sharp here. So howdy, everyone. Yeah, name's Anthony Close, as James said, and I'm from Western Victoria. That's where Colour is, James, out near Hamilton, the SA border. And I'm involved in a family farming business called Currawira, where we run a mixed sheep and cattle operation, as well as doing some seed stock in both of those. My scholarship was supported by AWI, same as James's, to research ways that the merino can once again become a prominent feature in the Australian farming landscape, or how, as I captioned it, make the merinos great again. So in my travels, I aimed to get the three main things that would turn the industry around. So the first one, and I'll actually just touch on what Jen spoke about earlier, because it was really hit home with me about our fragmented R&D and the need for collaboration to make it work, and how fragmentation in R&D sort of makes it underperform. But when R&D is done really well, how powerful it is. So my first recommendation was around the sheep industry structure, and that I actually recommended that we split the sheep meat off MLA and bring the sheep meat and wool industry under one R&D roof to create a sheep industry body that's solely focused on sheep and the sheep producers. The second recommendation was around the way we market our wool. Wool's the sort of the fundamental difference we have as merino producers. So I recommend that the wool brokers needed to do more marketing and change the supply chains to more long-term contracts between producers and brands, like they have in New Zealand with the New Zealand Merino Company, which is backed by ZQ, a QA program to assure the customers of their environmental, social and animal welfare statuses. The third recommendation was around getting some new technologies that could help make the merinos great again. And they were a foot rot breeding value that they had in New Zealand, and as well as some virtual fencing. Both of these technologies are still in their early days, but with some more investment and effort, could really have a dramatic impact on the sheep industry in the future. Since I returned post Nuffield, I've been reasonably involved in industry and helped out with the Wool 2030 strategic plan, which was a really great space post Nuffield, just to unload all the stuff and thoughts that I've had in my head over the travels into a positive way for the industry going forward. So that was a really enjoyable thing to do. And linking it to the SDG there to finish off, I would say it's probably around supply chains and the impact they have on everyone in them. Disruptive supply chains can cause havoc and increase the risk across the whole supply chain. So having a really strong, reliable supply chain gives people and communities stability, which makes their businesses safer, resilient, and more sustainable long term. Thank you.
Brilliant, Anthony, and thank you so much for your presentation there. It's great to hear a fellow AWI scholar, get to go and get a global view on the industry and textiles. So it's great to see your growth in that area. We've got a few panel questions now, and I see, Jen, you've already answered one in the Q&A section. You couldn't hold yourself back, which is great. But I might just pick that one up for everyone. So it's from Mark Swift, who was a 2012 scholar as well. Jen, do we also need to build out risk management protocols for governments if promoting, mandating novel products and strategies at scale and rapidly that are cognizant of the tail risks where they exist. Very eloquently put there, Mark. And I might just get you to address that for the audience verbally, if that's okay, Jen.
Yeah, no, I thought it was a great question from Mark, and it really is, and it reminded me a little bit of what Dick was saying, in that sometimes we do not support our early adopters as much as we could, and you know, the innovation cycle really needs early adopters. So you know, I think managing those risks is an important part of what we should do, but also providing a lot more informed, enabling informed risk taking. So for the true explorers out there that want to adopt things, just making sure that they really have the trusted advice that they need to try and explore that option as well. But yeah, I guess it depends. I'm sure that I expect there are certain instances where maybe even more support for those tail end risks would help drive things. And I have, you know, we have been talking a little bit with the department about, you know, they're really keen on driving adoption, and then all the RDCs also are really keen on driving adoption. So I think, you know, this issue will definitely come up. I haven't heard of any solutions yet, though, I'll confess, but I think it is an issue that's worth discussing.
Brilliant, Jen. Yeah, I like how the how the venture science model has flipped research and it's commercializing it. I think it's brilliant. Another question I had to throw to you was actually in terms of farming and agriculture is very innovative, and there's extreme inventors in the agricultural space. So have you come across many, I suppose, farmers or partners, farming partners that you've got on your projects that are actually engaging with R&D tax incentives for their innovation and research? I'm not sure if you're aware of that scheme or tax setting, but yeah, it's quite a good accelerator and enabler for commercializing research. But that if not, you can take that question on notice. And yeah.
Yeah, no, I'm not aware of any producers or growers, but certainly some of the SMEs and mid-tier companies that we deal with, yes, absolutely. And we often they feel they want to grow their market through innovation, but they're not exactly sure how. So then it's a conversation really around the market that they want to occupy, and then working back to the innovation, and then having a conversation of, if they need some science and technology, what might that be? So, I think people involved in R&D can also play that role, a little bit of talking through innovation from our awareness of what's available. So limited experience, but yeah, I think that's one way to go. I think other ways of using the market to pull funds back into the R&D sector is also another way. Yeah.
Right, Jen. Yeah, that's great. I think, well, naturally, farmers are doing trials all the time and exploring that, so it might be worth exploring that a little bit more offline. But another question I might just pose that to Renee that we've got is, how can we reduce energy costs, which in Australia contribute to 70% of the greenhouse gas emissions in urban communities? For Renee.
Sorry, what was that question? I missed.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, I just had a question directed to you. How can we reduce energy costs, which in Australia contribute to 70% of greenhouse gas emissions in urban communities?
In urban communities, I definitely think the green spacing is going to play a huge role in our cities, and I've really noticed it during the lockdown periods with COVID. People are looking forward to getting out of their houses. It cools their home lives. So the research shows that tree-lined streets have up to 10 to 15 degrees cooler. So using less energy by having those green spaces, which although use water, they're quite efficient at reducing other energy inputs as well. So I think that's going to be something that we need to be looking at, not just in urban communities, but also on farm as well. There's some really good research that shows using shelter belts helps protect those soils, keeps them cooler, creates a much better environment for the microbiome sort of within that space as well. So I think that's something that is going to be really important in future planning in those urban communities.
Absolutely. And as a scholar, in 2013 when we were traveling, we went to China, and some of these cities and communities are built on amazing agricultural land, just like Silicon Valley is. It was interesting to see the Chinese actually in those green belts plant trees and plant varieties that actually grows food. I just couldn't believe the foresight there. So great opportunity to sort of do that as a combination. Frank, I suppose I might throw to you now and sort of the timber prices at the moment in Australia are going through the roof post COVID, and the building requirements are going through. Have you got much of a view on where that will be headed and where we're sort of going there?
Yeah, well, what we're seeing now is exports to China have exceeded domestic supply. So we now got a timber shortage. We've now had a shrinking plantation estate nationally, and that's been for a number of reasons. Obviously, a lot of repatriation of former MIS plantations that were put in the early 2000s, and I think there needs to be a complete reset of how we see the services of plantations and how that fits into different economic models. So one of the biggest issues around MIS, and I mean, if you looked at the policy lever to get a lot of trees in the ground very quickly, it was fantastic. Unfortunately, a lot of the decision makers got greedy and they made very poor decisions about what species went into the ground, in what place, at what scale. And a lot of those three critical things were went awry. And I think that if we look at longer rotation crops like pine, which is obviously the dominant building material that we use in Australia, we need to ensure that things like natural capital and carbon can carry those crops to a longer rotation to ensure that long-term supply of building materials in Australia can be achieved. Because one, there's quite a few things about pine that's attractive, and it's well researched. We've been growing it far longer than a lot of our hardwoods in Australia. As a plantation species, it's not as fussy in relation to rainfall and land quality. So we're not going to see that battle between high quality agricultural land and trees being planted on that land. And I also think that if we make sure that there's a cultural shift in understanding the importance of plantations, we're going to avoid the emergence of substitute products. So one of the interesting things that I heard this morning was that a managed forest sequests more carbon than a locked up forest. Now, that is in context of ensuring that the trees sequester the carbon while it's growing. The carbon is stored in the timber. The timber offsets high carbon using materials like steel and concrete, and then byproducts from the tree can go into a biofuel or a bioenergy type system. So as a whole system, it's far better having a managed forest than a completely locked up forest, which eventually will actually reach a quick equilibrium of sequestering carbon anyway. So the timber prices is not going to go away. Very interestingly, the building scheme that Scott Morrison released pre-COVID was expected to build 20,000 houses. There's now 120,000 permits for those houses, where they're all under construction, and it is expected that 200,000 houses will be built under that scheme. So where the materials and where the skills are going to come from that is going to be a real challenge. And obviously, I think that anyone's looked at farming equipment or vehicles or anything, we're actually seeing a real backlog of supply, and timber is going to be no different. So yeah, the industry is facing a lot of challenges, and one of the first and foremost ones I can see, and I'd love to get a lot of people in agriculture thinking about it, and that's ensuring that the forest industry avoids the same reputational damage that we had through MIS through the new realm of carbon and natural capital accounting. So there's going to be, yeah,
great. That's they are truly interesting insights, mate. I wish we could go on longer, exploring that. What I'd do would be encourage all the audience there to actually connect with Renee, Frank, Anthony, and Jen. When the post this conference, we're going to be posting the audience to the audience I suppose the presentations. But I'd really encourage people. Nuffield is about networking and solving problems together and gaining better insights and transferring knowledge between each other. So I wouldn't limit it to just this conference. I would actually explore those relationships further. I'd probably suggest Anthony, we don't have much time left, but I'd suggest that Wool might play a very similar role to what Frank's talking about in terms of sequestering carbon and so I might just hold that thought there, Anthony, unless you've got a final comment that you'd like to explore with us. But we've got some thank yous to do for this conference, and particularly everyone that's presented. We'd like to thank them, the new scholars, and particularly like to introduce Rob Bradley to close out this conference. And just wanted to say thanks very much. It's been a very stimulating conference, and I'd like to pass over. Thank you, everyone. Thanks, Jen. Thanks, Renee. Thanks, Anthony and Frank.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, James, for your hosting of this afternoon's session. It's been fantastic. So it's been a wonderful conference. Certainly like to reiterate the thanks that we've had for Rabo and CSIRO for their support of our virtual conference this year, and also the addition of both having speakers in terms of Lachlan and Jen this afternoon. Their contribution's been fantastic. I'd certainly like to say thanks to our executive team, Jody and Nicola, who are sort of pedaling the bicycle behind the scenes and making sure everyone pops up on screens at the right time, and that we all look respectable, even though we're probably in different settings all around the country. So thanks, Jody and Nicola. It's been fantastic. Thanks to the 2019 scholars. We've asked them several times now to front up and do some virtual presentations. So much appreciated. And we hope to actually see you present in person and in one point in time in the future. And our session chairs, we've certainly gone back and found lots of our enthusiast scholars from the past to come along and to chair our session. So thanks, James, and all the girls and guys who have come along and to do that. I'd like to say congratulations to our 12 new scholars that Jody announced today. Wish them well in their endeavours. 2022 hopefully going to be a new year for all of us, and hopefully we can get some scholars travelling the world. Jen said, I don't know if the word COVID's been banned as yet in this conference, but the difficulties of COVID has certainly got Nuffield very active in the virtual world. I mean, we've gone from having interviews and presentations to conferences to global focus programs being conducted virtually. So scholars in the last 12 months have visited Kenya. I think they've been to Stu Barton's place once already. They've been to the Netherlands, Brazil, Ireland, a corporate ag global focus session, as well as a trip to Bayer's facility in Chesterfield in the US. So we're certainly making the most of it. It's not a replacement for the real thing, but the value of information is no different, and it's a really important, probably nearly a more important thing in times like this. I just want to reiterate that Nuffield remains in a really strong position to sort of build the human capacity in Australian agriculture. So take the enthusiasm of the last 2 days, share the presentations, which, as James said, will be available on YouTube in the next couple of days. We'll also make available Jess's illustrations, which are a really great summary of the presentations that occurred, and feel free to use those in your organisations. I encourage everyone to work on our brightest and best in the ag sector to broaden their horizons and apply for a scholarship. Rebuilding connections in a world which has been shut down by COVID over the last 2 years is going to be very important. Probably as important as it was 70 years ago when we sent scholars away by ship and bicycle to see what was happening on the other side of the world. It's no different today. Getting out there, getting out of our comfort zone and being challenged and seeing things firsthand in what's happening in the ag world is important now as it was then. Before I finish up, I'd just also like to make note that earlier this week at our AGM, we announced that Terry Hare, Order of Australia, on his life membership of Nuffield Australia. So, thanks to Terry. There's quite a few scholars out there who were under Terry's tutorship when he was chair of Nuffield, and Terry's a real enthusiast for Nuffield, and his life membership's well deserved. I'd also like to welcome Brian McAlpine, a 2003 WA scholar, as a new appointment to the Nuffield board. I'd like to wish all the 20, 21s and 22 scholars, and effectively our stockpile of scholars that we have, all the best for their travels in 2022, and hope that it goes smoothly and we do get travelling and we get back to some degree of normality. In closing, I'd hope to see everyone in person at our 2022 National Conference, which is this stage is planned to be in Perth. In the meantime, stay connected with Nuffield. Our state-based organisations are working hard to continue with activities when lockdowns allow. So thanks for your attendance. I hope you all enjoyed. It's nice to get a little field injection every now and then and find that it's just as enthusiastic as you remember it to be. So thank you and goodbye, and thanks for your attendance.